Hello, it's Kamal here. Welcome to episode 2 of this special edition of the Daily Tea, the tech boss who was Russia's secret spy. And if you haven't already, make sure to go and listen to episode 1.
It's July 6th, 2014, a beautiful day in the middle of summer in the city of Nice. Located on the French Riviera, you can hear the gentle lapping of the Mediterranean as you walk down the marina, passing the luxury super yachts of Russian oligarchs. One of these yachts is Poseidon III. A young woman with long blonde hair and green eyes is celebrating her 30th birthday. Her name is Natalia Zablina. She's a Russian erotic model and actress. The pinnacle of her acting career has been playing a secret agent in a B-movie called Red Lips 2, Bloodlust. Among the crowd of friends and the swirling champagne glasses is her boyfriend, Jan Marsalek. Natalia and Marsalek had met while he was travelling to the Russian capital to try and negotiate a series of deals. At this stage of the story, Marsalek is still calling the shots at Wirecard. He's got the ears of politicians and intelligence services around the world. But he wants more than their ears. He wants their trust. It's on this boat, in the soft summer air of July 2014, that Jan Marsalek meets the Russian spy who is said to become his handler. And that man is Stanislav Petlinsky. Marsalek's life is about to split between the veneer of his official career at Wirecard and his secret role as a Russian operative. Data shows that in 2014, he flew to Russia 10 times, sometimes just for a day. I've been trying to piece together that double life. What operations was Jan Marsalek involved in? Who knew what and when? I'm Hayley Dixon, special correspondent at The Telegraph, and this is the Daily Tea Investigates, the tech boss who was Russia's secret spy. Episode 2, From Russia with Love. After the meeting in Nice, Marsalek returns to Vienna. The Austrian capital is a prime place to be as an agent. Because the Cold War movies didn't make it up. Vienna really is the spy capital of Europe. The shadowy world of espionage in the city was captured in the 1949 film The Third Man. How much has changed since then?
Exactly the same. It's since the 1950, 1960. Here is still Cold War, to be honest. On the streets, the diplomats, we don't know what they're doing.
That's David Stugmuller, an MP who sits on Austria's National Council. He's been investigating Marsalek's links to politicians and officials and trying to establish how deep the corruption goes. We met in the Parliament building in Vienna.
It's not forbidden in Austria to spy other countries. So when you're not spying Austria, everything is allowed. It's a blind spot. Everyone can do whatever they want. And of course, some country, I think most of the country like it, because also our Western countries like US or UK or other countries because you can do whatever you want and you can spy. Don't do it against Austria, but the rest, everything is fine. But of the other side, there's happening a lot. It makes Austria not safer. It makes Austria a hotspot for all this crazy diplomats.
After his recruitment, Marsalek paid his contacts in the Austrian Secret Service to do research for him, and he would then pass that information on to the Russians. Historian Thomas Riegler.
And they kind of use their access to databases to give information on certain people to Marsalek, whom he suspected as being intelligence agents or of interest to the Russian services because of their opposition to the Kremlin. So that's one of the main investigations that are done in Austria right now.
I've actually obtained access to these investigation files. I'm talking about hundreds of pages of documents, many of which are marked confidential or top secret. And while ploughing through investigative files in German might not be everyone's idea of a good time, there were a treasure trove of names. Marsalek used at least 2 Austrian agents. Back to MP David Stogmüller.
One thing what you see when you look through the people here in Austria who are involved in this field, they are all depressed all are, I don't know, disappointed about one field. They are all disappointed guys. He was in the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he was always looking for people who want a part of this dark circle of spy. If they know it or not, I don't know it exactly, but they want to work with Jan Marsalek because he was so important. He had money, he had a Porsche, a big villa in Munich. They want to be a part of that.
The first one was a guy called Martin Weiss. He had been chief of Austrian intelligence operations, quite senior in their secret services, before Marsalek employed him as a consultant. Weiss has disappeared. He was evacuated by Marsalek to Dubai, out of the reach of Austrian authorities, as soon as the heat was turned up.
They want to be important, and they want to do something important thing. I don't think that the most people who are included in this field, they don't know what they are doing. They want the money and want to be accepted of one side.
That's a classic way to turn people. You tap into their delusions, their thirst for grandeur, and their greed. The other guy that Marsalek used is called Egisto Ott. He was a former police officer, and he'd also worked at Austria's security services. It's alleged that Marsalek paid Ott to carry out research. Ott is accused of accessing police databases, flight details, Schengen databases, and even persuading police officers in countries including Italy, Germany, the UK and Croatia to hand over information on specific people who had been critical of the Kremlin.
So there's something else behind it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a bungalow type
bungalow,
house.
but it looked like it could almost be a...
Could it be his second part of his property?
Yeah, it might be. It could be like a...
Can you knock on that?
We decided to take a trip to Carinthia in the Eastern Alps to try and talk to Ott about what he was doing for Marsalek and whether he knew he was working for the Russian state. But he wasn't too pleased to see us. Hello. Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. For Egisto Ott?
Egisto? Kom igjen med.
Hello, Mr. Ott. I'm sorry to bother you. My name's Hayley from the Daily Telegraph in London. This is my colleague, Georgia.
I'm not interested.
Not interested. Then, the following day, I got a message from a journalist who I'd never met before, asking me how long I'd be in Vienna and whether we could meet for a drink. In this investigation, more than any other I've worked on, there have been a number of these occasions. Sometimes you'll knock on someone's door and a few hours later get a phone call from their lawyer or their PR team. But while digging on Marsalek, several times I've knocked on someone's door and then hours later I get a mysterious message from someone who says they just want to help me get to the truth or that they're calling so I don't waste my time. So I went for a drink, and the outcome was that Ott agreed to do an interview with us. And this is what he had to say about the allegations that he had been abusing his position to make searches on the orders of Marsalek, a Russian spy.
No, I did not make charges for searches or something for Mr. Marsalek. Telling story by some officials of the Ministry of Interior and some investigators, but nothing else. But it's not true. And even if you will repeat this 100 times, it will not becoming more true.
But I've seen some of the evidence against Ott. I've read the 86-page arrest warrant from April last year. It painstakingly details how he systematically collected secret facts and findings not intended for the public, as well as personal data from police databases for the purpose of transmitting them to Jan Marsalek and to unknown representatives of the Russian authorities. At one point, he was searching for details on Dmitry Senin, an on-the-run FSB agent. Police say that the fingerprints and a photograph that he had been using in the searches were provided directly by the Russian secret services, via Marsalek. If that wasn't information for the Kremlin, then who was it for?
This is true, but on this case, this was this is not in 2019 because this was before in 2000, I think in 2017 or 2016, 2017, and this was part of an cooperation with other secret services, and this was an official work, and I cannot talk about this. I cannot. No, this is secret.
So you were carrying out searches as part of your work, but you weren't aware that they were linked to Mr. Marsalek in any way?
I don't know it, but I'm sure it was not linked to Mr. Marsalek. This was an official work, I beg your pardon, but I cannot talk about this because this is under state security on high
State
level,
security. Okay.
top secret.
So all the charges against you that have been laid so far are lies.
A lot of them, yeah, because they know, even they know also of the secret of the top secret operations, which I did in my service when I was on service, but they denied this work.
He's been arrested twice. He has spent months in jail. Why would the Austrian authorities make all of this up? There have been at points more than 30 cases against him, he admits. Ott claims that he and Weiss, the ex-spy working for Marsalek as a consultant, have been targeted because they're whistleblowers. They're exposing corruption linked to the Austrian People's Party, he says, which has held power in the country for most of the last 3 decades.
There have been massive criminal acts at the highest levels, including multi-million euro cash thefts, corruption, and embezzlement. The damage to the Republic of Austria is conservatively estimated at over 100 million of euros. Martin Weiss and I uncovered several of these incidents, and as a result, we are being persecuted and in an attempt to silence and discredit us. Many of the responsible individuals remain in office today with full political support.
That would be pretty widespread corruption in an EU member state. Really? 30 cases? Dozens of officers and MPs? Their investigators have even been cooperating with our security agencies, and those close to the case have praised the work that they've done. But Ott is insistent.
You must imagine that the police that normally has to not to cover, but they have to cover up some stories, they are writing false reports. It's like in a mafia state. It's in a like in a in a Republic of Banana, and I can't believe, but it's slowly it comes out that I'm really living in a Republic of Banana. I am a spy. I was a spy, and I will be a spy until I die. But most important thing is this: I was an Austrian spy. I worked for the Austrian authority, and I worked for the Austrian Republic. But no, and I swear on the Austrian constitution twice.
He only met Marsalek a couple of times when he was asked to build a safe room in his Munich villa, he told me.
I even have had also short contact to Mr. Marsalek, and the experience to me, it was he was a very smart, tough manager, but we didn't have long conversation. More, I cannot tell you more.
So you didn't have a friendship with him at all?
No, it was to put it in a timeline. It would be, I think, about half an hour, not more than 1 hour. And in 1 hour, you cannot make a friendship.
He says that he did carry out some open source investigations on people for Weiss, but that nothing was illegal. Another person who has protested their innocence, well, maybe that's not quite the right word, but another person who denies their role in this saga, as it is told by the Western police and security agencies, is Stanislav Petlinski. He denies recruiting Marsalek, he denies being his handler, and he denies ever working directly for the GRU or the FSB. The scale of Marsalek's operations keep on growing, and so does his boldness. What's fascinating about him, as many have pointed out and I keep on discovering, is how he was barely hiding any of his activities. He kept on hiding in plain sight. 2 years after his recruitment, Marsalek goes as far as setting up a parallel office in Munich, where Wirecard's headquarters are. It's a 4-storey, neo-Baroque villa on one of Munich's grandest streets, which he rented for almost 700,000 euros a year. And believe it or not, it's just across the street from the Russian consulate. On his desk, which is often littered with piles of cash, there's a swinging figure of Vladimir Putin. And as incredible as it seems, even gathering information for the Kremlin and running agents on the side of running a company wasn't enough. Marsalek always wanted bigger. Marsalek's biggest operation was yet to come. His fingerprints are all over an attempt to discredit Austria's spy services in order to rebuild them with new leadership, with allegiances to Russia. It all started on a February morning in 2018, when dozens of police, wearing bulletproof vests and balaclavas and armed with Glock pistols and a battering ram, burst into the headquarters of the BVT, the Austrian Secret Services. They seized confidential information from the agency's servers and physical files that had been left on the desks overnight. That operation shattered Austria's reputation in the intelligence world and led ultimately to the agency's closure. I have seen files and messages which suggest that this operation had been organised by Austria's far-right party, who at the time were part of a coalition government, and all with the help of Jan Marsalek, who by then was working with Russia. And it could have worked, had the coalition not been brought down by one man and one video, and the Wenger boys. That man is Julian Hessenthaler.
When I was asked by this friend of mine, this lawyer, to take part in what became known as this Ibiza story, or which ended in the Ibiza video, my prime motivation, aside from friendship, was because I had from prior projects that I had gotten to the conviction that there was Russian influence operations going on in Austria which were not getting the needed attention.
Before the raid on the BVT, Julian, a security consultant, had been recruited by a friend of his, a lawyer, to get involved in a sting operation. The FPO, or Freedom Party, both far-right and outwardly pro-Russian, was the junior party in Austria's coalition government. And in July 2017, Julian found himself in a luxury villa in Ibiza with the party's leader, his aide and party colleague, and an elegant Russian woman dressed in designer black dress and high heels.
Wenn es sowas so gibt oder sagen willst, gibt es Spender für die Wahl jetzt, für den Wahlkampf.
The politicians think that the woman is the niece of an oligarch and that Julian is a security officer. But what they don't know is it's a honey trap, an elaborately prepared and well-funded sting operation. And the whole thing is being filmed. The hidden camera appears to capture the leader offering government contracts in exchange for political support. Julian told us he'd gotten involved because he noticed that there were huge sums of Russian money flowing through dubious channels into Austria.
To me, the Ibiza video was very, very clearly showing, aside from the corruption issue, a potential issue with Russian influence, which I thought that the Ibiza video made very clear because it was about black Russian money, supposedly buying favors from politics, etc.
They didn't release it for 2 years, and then it dropped, just days before the European Parliament went to the polls. The scandal became known as Ibisagate.
Make some noise for the Bang-Up Boys.
On the 30th of May 2019, several thousand people gathered in a square in Vienna city centre, which is home to some of Austria's most senior officials. They were there for a demonstration against the coalition government. They held brightly coloured signs and wore T-shirts which read "Zack, Zack, Zack, Ibiza, whoever pays creates." After the speeches, the evening continued with music. The crowds began to scream with excitement as a group of singers took to the small stage for a special performance. They were the Dutch pop group Wenger Boys, and they were playing their 1999 hit "We're Going to Ibiza," which became the unofficial anthem of the government crisis in Austria. The video and the ensuing scandal brought down Austria's entire government and kicked the Freedom Party out of the coalition, but not out of Austrian politics. The FPO, which still has strong ties to Russia, won last year's election. They didn't quite get the majority needed to form the government, and they are set to be locked out of power by a coalition of other parties. But it shows just how popular they are. And they've still got very strong ties to Russia. The investigation that followed the Ibiza video revealed messages between Marsalek and the leadership of the Freedom Party about plans to install a new head of Austria's spy services.
If true, it's a very ballsy plan, a plan which actually probably would have worked. It seems like the Ibiza video kind of disturbed that plan.
Julian didn't know about the plan when he filmed the video, but he had been interested in Russia's corruption of government officials. Unknowingly, he had a hand in swerving what could have been one of Marsalek's biggest operations.
Why that might be interesting is pretty obvious, I would think, because usually you try to place a mole inside the service of a foreign country, and that's already considered high tradecraft. Now, if you're able to rebuild a complete service with your own people in a foreign country, that's next level. I don't think that's ever been done before. If that had been successful, I tip my hat to that.
So Marsalek didn't just have links to Russia. He wasn't just spying for Russia. He was involved in what could have been the most audacious plot to take over a country's secret service. When the Austrian coalition comes apart following Ibisagate, Marsalek is still COO at Wirecard. In fact, it's a whole year before the company collapses and he boards that plane for Belarus, exposing him as a Russian agent.
But nobody's asking the real question here, like, what did our intelligence services know, and why did they let him walk out so easily?
Why did no one stop him? Fabio De Masi, the German MEP, wants to know. And so do I.
Of course, you can say that there's mistakes in state bureaucracy and that maybe some people were deceived by Wirecard. But I don't believe in so many mistakes. You have to enjoy some level of protection, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense.
Does the British intelligence services have questions to answer, for example? That's a question that I asked Fabio during our interview, and one I've been asking myself. Because we know that he had the Novichok formula just months after it was used to poison the Skripals in Salisbury. And we know that he showed it to traders in London.
Of course, one could imagine that maybe the British services were alerted about it as well, and maybe they even reached out to the German intelligence services. I mean, I have no proof of that, but it would seem quite logic to me, and that maybe, they're calling in Germany and asking, what is your guy doing here? Something like that. So, of course, that would be a question. And I mean, I told you that I learned about Wirecard the first time in 2017. I also learned about that some of the information was circulating around former intelligence officers from Western countries. Maybe German services had an interest in using Wirecard as a Trojan horse in other markets. Maybe that was the reason it was shielded and protected.
So the theory is that Marsalek was working with a number of different agencies, and that could have provided him with some protection. But when the fraud emerged at Wirecard, he was forced to pick a side. So where is Marsalek now? And who is he working for? I am just one of many journalists, police officers and spies who have tried to piece this information together. But what I have found is that every single question just leads to another question. When Marsalek boarded that plane at Bad Voslau Airport, he'd claimed that he was travelling to the Philippines to look for the missing money. There were even faked immigration records to show that he had landed. That lie began a series of conspiracy theories, which have seen claims that he is in India or Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Western security agencies are certain that he is in Russia, and the Germans traced him in 2020 to a suburb of Moscow. The Kremlin, however, suggested that those looking for him might want to look in Kazakhstan. Back to Hessenthaler. Did Austria start looking into the allegations then?
Well, to my knowledge, there was no criminal investigation against Marsalek even after he fled. Austria decided to treat the issue. Now, I cannot say what was done behind closed doors, but officially Austria was treating the issue as a German issue. As far as I know, the criminal investigation did not run against him. Even when he fled, it was against Ott and Weiss. My impression was that the Austrians were primarily trying to sort of clean house in their own backyards.
It wasn't just the Austrian authorities that looked like they were trying to pass the buck. Most people that I approached who knew Marsalek personally were quick to disown him. I don't know anything. It was a business relationship. And, most commonly, I want nothing to do with this because my connection to Marsalek has ruined my life. People were difficult to trace. They had deleted their online presence, moved house, gone to ground. But one name kept coming up.
So who is this Ray Accusations?
That's producer Georgia again. So he was one of Marsalek's closest friends, and lots of people told me that if anyone was still in touch with him, it would be Ray. Now, Ray lives in the US, and he's actually a porn baron, and the pair did quite a lot of business together as well. There are these incredible stories that have come out of Wirecard where staff say that they were forced to hand over plastic bags stuffed with 30,000 euros in cash to Accusations. Now, he was actually in prison when Wirecard collapsed and Marsalek went on the run.
What did he go to prison for?
He'd been involved in this scheme to launder £150 million by disguising payments for cannabis products. Marsalek was even named in the court papers. It was a kind of another thing that he was linked to. By last summer, Accusations had actually served his 30-month prison sentence, and so I went to try and see him at his home in the Agora Hills, which is just outside of LA.
Did you actually get anything from him?
Well, there was some stuff that was interesting, but actually rather than enlightening me as to what Marsalek was really up to, he tried to just pour cold water on my entire investigation.
I heard the same stuff, but I don't know what is true and what is not. A lot of stuff that you see in the news isn't true, and 99% of the stuff that I've seen is just nonsense. I mean, he lived on a Lufthansa flight. He was working 99% of his life. He was a banker, and all he ever did was work. And I think that, I don't know, but I don't think that in any way Jan stole any money or orchestrated anything. I think that they threw him under the bus. It's easy to blame him while everyone else did nothing. His COO thought he was Steve Jobs, but they didn't do any work. Jan was the one traveling around. You know, I wish he would come back and just do his time. He is one of the most honest, trustworthy people I've ever met. Jan is honest. He doesn't lie. He doesn't exaggerate. He just does what he says he'll do, and I trust him completely.
Now, that is Accusations' words, but that's not actually him speaking. We had his words voiced by an actor. And that's because late last year, I contacted him to ask him to appear on this podcast, but I heard nothing back. The day after I messaged him was the day that I finally got hold of Petlinski, the man alleged to be Marsalek's handler. I asked him the same thing that I asked Accusations. When was the last time that you spoke to Jan Marsalek? And out of the dozens of people I've spoken to, I finally got a different answer. About 3 weeks ago, Petlinski said. Marsalek had called him because their mutual friend in America had passed away. I told him that I'd been trying to contact Accusations. Petlinski told me in his thick Russian accent, I don't think he's going to be able to respond to you. Accusations was dead. It was another bend in the roller coaster of the Jan Marsalek story. As if there weren't enough leads, I had to take just a little bit of time to investigate this one. Just a couple of months earlier, I'd been sitting in the front room of his £6 million mansion in the hills outside LA, admiring his swimming pool. He'd just bought a puppy. He seemed in good health. Was Petlinski even telling the truth? The first port of call in any death investigation is the coroner's office. And so I checked with the LA County Coroner. The cause of death at his home on October the 14th was deferred. What on earth did that mean? This is what the coroner's office told me.
Deferred means after completing an examination, a cause of death has not been determined and the deputy medical examiner is requesting more investigation into the death, including additional studies. Once the tests or studies come back, the deputy medical examiner reviews the case again and makes the cause of death determination. Due to the ongoing death investigation, the department cannot disclose what the tests or studies are being conducted. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Lost Hills Bureau is the investigating law enforcement agency for this case.
At the time, I went to the police, and they said that they were not currently treating it as homicide, but that they were still exploring all investigative leads. And then, as the jury were deliberating over their verdicts, the coroner finally closed the case, confirming that his death was a drug overdose. But just as for months there had been questions over his death, there are also questions about what he told me about Marsalek. I asked him if Marsalek was working with the intelligence agencies.
I don't have first-hand knowledge, so I can't say anything, but I have my doubts. I have heard about him working with intelligence agencies, but I think that's bullshit. He has no background in intelligence at all. He talked about politics, not intelligence. He was very interested in politics, but again, because he was a businessman. Because he was a guy that wanted to take his bank global. All he cared about was the global presence of Wirecard. If you told him to go to the moon for that company, he would have. But it's not intelligence. It's not spying. It's being globally aware from that perspective. Everything you see said about Jan is wrong.
He had an answer for every question that I threw at him. Didn't he know the Russian connection? What about Marsalek's trip to Palmyra in Syria? Didn't he see those photos of Marsalek in combat gear in the middle of a war zone with a senior guy from the Wagner group?
Yes, I saw photos. Jan is a huge art buff, a huge history buff, and he was extremely upset when ISIS started blowing stuff up. He wanted to go and see it, and he felt that this was his last chance. Yes, his Russian guys set that up. It was about money, about business. Jan doesn't care about that intelligence stuff. It's not his thing. He is a businessman, and that's all he does. Whoever he knows, he met through the bank. That includes the Russians, anyone that he deals with.
So, where is he now? Was Ray still in touch?
He was extremely charismatic, extremely sweet, extremely polite, extremely respectful, and always dressed to the nines. Very, very old-fashioned. Polite and respectful. He's a really good guy, and one of my best friends. He should come back and do his time. Prisons in Germany are like 5-star hotels. If I could talk to him, I'd tell him to just come back and do his time. It won't be that hard. No one I know has been able to talk to him since she left. I hope he's okay. I think he could be dead. If he's in Moscow, he's as much a hostage as a guest, I think. But the best scenario is that he'll stay alive until there's some way to trade him. My personal opinion is that he's dead. I and a few people that I know would have heard from him if he was alive. It's not that hard to contact people. I hope not, but until we see him, who knows? Everyone makes their own bed. You know, he could have stayed and just fought it out, but he's not a rat like those other people. He would have stayed and got slaughtered.
But if he is dead, why do the British authorities think that he's running a Bulgarian spy ring on behalf of the Kremlin? Doesn't Accusations believe those charges?
Look, if it doesn't involve a $1 billion deal or a wine from 50 years ago, then Jan is not interested. That's not what he does. He's purely a financial monster, even though he doesn't even care about that stuff for himself. No money, no real assets. He has a watch that was a gift. That's it. All this stuff is like something out of a movie plot. Come on, that's not who he was.
But the conversation wasn't a total waste of time, because he did fill in one blank for me. I asked him about Marsalek's involvement with the American Secret Services, and I knew that he'd been involved in a request for them to meet Marsalek in 2019 because I'd seen the email. He couldn't wriggle out of it.
The meeting was asked for by DOJ officials. The government wanted information from Jan. Jan actually agreed to help, and there was a meeting he set up with his attorney here to go and speak to them. I'm not sure what happened after that or whether it fizzled out. I think they wanted to verify if this guy had money with Wirecard. It was about an asset freeze. He wasn't Russian. He was some Austrian EU guy, Austrian Czech or Austrian Polish, something similar to Jan.
Accusations said that he had no idea where Marsalek was. But if that was true, how did Marsalek know that he had passed away? As a journalist, I'm used to having doors slammed in my face. I'm not used to being lied to. People usually squirm when they're lying to you, but not in this case. This muddying of the truth, an information war as Fabio described it, is one of the reasons that the search for Marsalek has now taken on an almost mythical status. And that takes us back from the hills of LA and into the courtroom at London's Old Bailey.
Police! Police! Stay where you are! Police! Police! Stay where you are! Police!
It's the wrong place.
Support!
I think it's the wrong place.
Got a search warrant to search the address, okay?
Oh yeah, sure. No.
Yeah?
That's in episode 3 of The Daily T Investigates, the millionaire tech boss who became a Russian spy.